Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We have arrived. Another Shabbat. Okay. All right, folks, let's dive in. We've got a great Torah portion this week, she says every Saturday. Uh, Under the auspices of Im Kemach in Torah, we're very grateful to Doris Donnelly for sponsoring our bagels and to Jackie Weiner. Jackie, for picking up the bagels. We're so glad to have nourishment this Shabbat morning. Can you imagine without the bagels? We just wouldn't be able to do this. Okay. And Maida brought banana cake. She gave me a piece. I'm very excited to eat it. Thank you, Maida. All right, we are here. We've reached we're at the end of the month of Av. We're reading Parashat Re'eh. If you are following in a Chumash, this starts with Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. Folks are coming in that may not have access to copies of the text sheet because I gave them all away. So if you're able to share with someone next to you and make sure folks coming in can see a copy, that would be very useful and helpful. And one more quick announcement before we do our blessing for the study of Torah. We're going to flip this room for Tot Shabbat after Torah study. And so I want to invite everyone after to still linger, but maybe linger in the library or the commons. Keep schmoozing, but we got to flip the room. All right. We are going to go outside and splash also, so you may see them setting up some splashy stuff. You're welcome to splash with us if you want. All right, let's join together in the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, this is a very interesting portion. It has lots of different pieces and parts to it. So there's an outline here at the top of your source sheet. First, we have this little vignette about blessings and curses and choosing life. It gets a lot of airtime. It's a very good passage. And then we're going to have a whole slew of laws. Some of these laws will feel connected to each other. Some of them will not. But we will have one of the key pieces of Deuteronomy is the focus on centralizing the cult in Jerusalem. And so we'll see some of that beginning here. We'll have rules about how to eat meat and the tithes, warnings against idolatry and worshiping as the other nations do, warning against false prophets and people who do magic, all sorts of prohibitions. Then we'll have some dietary laws, more laws on tithing, and then we'll have the laws of release of the seventh year, which appear elsewhere in Torah as well, the dedication of the firstborn male livestock, because the firstborn of every species belongs to God. And then chapter 16, we have laws about the pilgrimage festivals. So it's a real journey. There's a lot of different little bits and bobs for us to dive into. So we'll start with Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. I'll read a few verses here to get us started, and then we'll see what's here. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments of your God Adonai that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse if you do not obey the commandments of your God Adonai, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day, and follow other gods whom you have not experienced. When your God Adonai brings you into the land that you are about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Ebal. Both are on the other side of the Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of the Canaanites, who dwell in the Arava, near Gilgal, by the terebinths of Moreh. For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that your God Adonai is assigning to you. When you have occupied it and are settled in it, take care to observe all the laws and rules that I have set before you this day. Okay, a couple of stylistic notes. When we read Deuteronomy, we will often see this name of God. So Adonai Elohim is used often in Deuteronomy. It appears elsewhere, but it is often used in Deuteronomy. So when you see, like in the English that I'm reading, it has God Adonai, but it's Adonai Elohim in the text. That's a kind of stylistic preference of the Deuteronomist writers. And we have this idea of blessings and curses. We have a binary. You are either following the laws or you are not following the laws. So one question is it just the laws given on this day, or is it all the laws that have been given so far and the ones given on this day? Or are we supposed to assume that the laws that follow this little section of laws, are the most important ones? That was a question. Because I need to drink some water. Who has a thought on this? Do you think it's just these laws or all the laws? Here's why I'm is the laws about Jerusalem. So we have to wonder, are we saying that that's the most important thing? Like, are we reading this in order of importance? And so all the laws that follow from this statement from God are the most important? Or are they just kind of what follows? Lou, what do you think? Oh, we could start with the 10 Commandments. Maybe, yeah. I mean, it definitely comes first chronologically. Steve, what do you think?
Fox doesn't sort of make any reference to a specific set of commandments.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I place before you a blessing or a curse, the blessing that you hearken to the commandments of Adonai.
Right.
The commandments.
What does he have, though, on verse 32?
You are to take care to observe all the laws and regulations that I place before you today.
So the today is the piece that I am choosing to be stuck on. So if it's just these laws today, this is not all of Torah in theory. This is just the laws that are following. What do you think?
So, as I understand it, laws are hierarchical. They are all equal.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's more important is irrelevant.
Okay, very good. This is an interesting point, too, because the 10 Commandments, I think, in our kind of multi-religious global connection to the Hebrew Bible, have become the capital T 10 Commandments. And I think that skews our understanding of the laws, but the point here is that all the laws are of import. They are all kind of non-hierarchically important. So then in theory, this would be all the laws, not just the ones today.
I'm not sure all laws are equivalent if the punishment that follows the breaking of the law is not equivalent.
Very good. So if we have some laws that get you stoned to death, let's say, and other laws, just hypothetically, there are many of those, by the way. If we have that, that's one category. We have another category, which is actually, I think, more devastating, which is the being cut off from your kin category. And then we have the category of like, you know, you kind of misbehave in the wilderness and there's a plague that kills everybody that you've ever met. There's lots of bad things, but they all hinge on, they're all different. All those things are different, and then kind of the meaning that we ascribe to the punishment is different. So this is an interesting point. I like put us on a tangent that I didn't actually mean to do, all because I wanted a sip of water. Candy. And then Jackie.
Doesn't Reform Judaism make some statement about the unimportance of some laws? For instance, the laws of kasher.
So this is an interesting point about Reform Judaism. Do we kind of reject or reprioritize certain laws? So one of the things that is different about Reform Judaism from, say, conservative Judaism or Orthodoxy is that we don't consider ourselves to be a halachic movement, which is not to say that we don't care about Jewish law, but the concept of boundedness to halacha is not the guiding principle of Jewish life in the Reform movement. So to put that a little bit differently, we might think about how the halacha, how Jewish law might inform our worldview and our Jewish values, and then the way that we might embody the observance of a particular law might change, might be different from someone in a different denomination. So there are Reform Jews who keep kosher. I think we might wonder, like, is that theologically driven? Is that culturally driven? Is that kind of family legacy and traditionally driven? There are lots of different reasons somebody may or may not keep a kosher home. Also, some people don't keep a kosher home, but they do only during Passover, right? Like, there's different ways, there's a whole range of a spectrum of practice in the Reform movement. And by the way, in other denominations also, we just, I think, are very open about that. And it's not to say that the halakha or Jewish law or the commandments are not important. It's just that we frame them slightly differently. And I think we use them as a guiding tool to live our Jewish values rather than a boundedness to, we must do this or else God will curse us, which is ironic given the verses that we're reading where it specifically says God will curse us if we don't do the commandments. So we might consider the Reform movement theology over many generations might not align exactly with a Deuteronomic theology. That's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. I don't think so. So that's a critique other movements will say of the, Candy said, does that just mean that we reject what we don't like? So there are certain pieces of Torah that Reform scholars have outwardly spoken out against. Like, this is not a piece of our worldview or the way that we function in a wider society. There are passages, particularly of Leviticus, that feel particularly painful in a kind of progressive modern understanding that we've been able to say, we're going to read those texts, we'll study those texts, but they're not going to be binding to us. They don't reflect our worldview anymore. Yeah.
But the whole point of laws in general is to avoid chaos and try to leave emotion out of certain behaviors. So if you can pick and choose, you'll have a big mess.
Well, and there are people who might say that we have a big mess. So it's interesting because I think the early reformers had a real focus on informed choice. This is a phrase you've probably heard before, where the idea was that we would educate our Jews and we would say, this is Jewish living, and then you will choose. You will have an informed choice as to which commandments you're following or which practices bring meaning to your life and what you're going to bring into your home. You know, looking back over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 generations, I'm not sure we would all agree that the education has been strong enough to lead to informed choice. So I don't know that I'm not sure that many of my peers, for example, have had a rigorous enough religious education to actually thoughtfully consider, okay, here is what kashrut means. I have seen it in action. It's not abstract to me. Here's why I find it religiously meaningful or culturally meaningful. This is how I'm choosing my practice. I don't know that that's happening on a rigorous level. So chaos is an interesting word for it. Maybe we'll say diversity of practice instead of chaos. Jackie, I know you had your hand up earlier. Did we pass you? There are so very many laws and rules. We have mitzvot, chukim, umishpatim. These are 3 different categories of laws. They each have their own characteristics. Sometimes the words seem to be used interchangeably, which is why I've made things more confusing by saying laws and rules kind of interchangeably. We can kind of understand the chukim and mishpatim to be under the umbrella of mitzvot, that the kind of commandedness is the key to the laws. So some of the laws, like we talked about earlier, seem to be really, really important, and some of them we can't really understand why they're important, like why certain fabrics couldn't be mixed together, for example, shatnez. Like, that prohibition doesn't make a lot of sense, and so there are categories that we can understand the reasoning of and categories that we may not understand the reasoning of. All of this is to say I don't have a great answer. Okay, let's take a look at our handouts. We have a piece here from the Midrash, from Devarim Rabbah 4:3. So the Torah portion begins Re'eh Anochi, and so they're giving us a Devar Acher, kind of another take on Re'eh Anochi, see I. Rabbi Elazar said, when the Holy One, blessed be he, said this matter at Sinai, from that time, from the mouth of the Most High, evil and good do not emerge. Rather, on its own, evil befalls those who perform evil, and good occurs to those who perform good. Alternatively, Rabbi Chagai said, God said, not only did I give you 2 paths, I went beyond the letter of the law and said to you, you shall choose life. Okay, I brought this because when I was reading this Rabbi Elazar piece really struck me. On its own, evil befalls those who perform evil, and good occurs to those who perform good. We're going to have a little bit of a theological journey in this Torah portion, and I want to just start here because I wonder, given everything we know about God so far in Torah, does it make sense that this is a moment where we would say, okay, God's laying out the table before us, there's blessing over here, there's curse over here, and now God is walking away from the table, it's up to us to decide. That feels like a shift in our relationship with God, or maybe more specifically in God's relationship with us. So I guess first question is, does that theology resonate with you as a student of this Torah portion? And or does it trouble you that the relationship with God is changing in this moment as we're about to cross the Jordan into the promised land? What does that demonstrate to us? Yeah.
I was wondering just now,
Is God tempting us? Can you elaborate?
yeah, you can have, you can do this, which is a good thing, but there's this over here, which you really don't like to do, it's up to you.
Okay, very interesting. So you might be drawn to the practices of your neighbors by, like, for example, they're idolaters. That might look really nice to you. Don't do it though. But you have to choose. Like, we have agency now. There's a temptation. So I guess the question for you is it a test before they go in, or is this just their next stage of the journey will be one of temptation? Could be both. That's right. That's right. Steve.
What strikes me is the individual nature of it.
Okay.
Because other parts of the Torah are really about collective punishment. Sodom and Gomorrah
Mm-hmm.
kind of approach.
Yeah.
So I think there's ways of reading what Rabbi Elia Elazar says,
Uh-huh.
and we can accept that as modern. But yeah, if you live a good life, you will, rises from prayer, a changed person, his prayer has been answered. Sort of that kind of theme.
Mm-hmm.
So what God is in some ways saying is the punishment is in the nature of the evil thing itself.
Yeah, I like that. Archie.
If you walk that path between blessing and curse, and you know that you're doing your best to stay on the blessing side, but as you walk the path, you get up to the line at which you can see the curse. At that point, because they're always there, you can either turn around 180 degrees, put your back to it, or you can backpedal.
Mm-hmm.
Always keep your eye on it. Always being aware that it's there. Sometimes to do good, you might have to step across the line a little bit,
Mm.
but you can still get back. If you come back, if you backpedal,
If you keep your eye on it.
if you keep your eye on it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Jackie.
Yeah, when I read this, evil is one word that I really reject.
Okay.
Because what is evil and how is evil described in the Tanakh?
That's a really good question. I think our concept of good and evil is informed by more than just Torah and Tanakh. Like, I think we have certain modern cultural attributions to goodness and evil. I think here, the idea is, it's actually, we're going to hear the word, it's in the kind of cadence of the High Holy Day season, is like ra'ah, like we've chosen the wrong thing, badness. It's not evil. So then what makes it evil? Intention, lack of holiness. I think that's open for our interpretation. It's not clear. Everything we do in translation is interpretive, right? But I think it's not always a clear, finite, boundaried thing, evil. And I think that's very difficult even in our own lives.
It's like growing up in the Jewish community, I don't hear that word very often.
It's not our primary focus. Actually, I think emphasized by this Torah portion, the idea choose life, that's the whole focus. We choose good, we choose life. We move away from evil when we can. Maybe we keep an eye on it.
But we move away from things that are not good,
Right.
but not, evil. It gets me.
Bless you. Sneezing to the truth. David agrees with you. There's another piece here which I think theologically complicates things for us as recipients of Torah, which is that if you choose good and you are blessed, your life is good. If you choose bad or do these terrible things, you're cursed. This opens up the whole, like, why do bad things happen to good people quandary, which as a rabbi is one of the most common conversations I'm having with people, especially people who are bereft, because it feels like there's some sort of judgment of punishment that is informed, I think, by our textual tradition that's very, very difficult to hold when you are mourning someone and seeking meaning or seeking any connectedness to sacred tradition, because it feels like must be a punishment. And so that's a very difficult, kind of prickly piece of this. Yeah, Russ.
The Israelites are going through a transition, not just to a new land, but a new land filled with people.
That's right.
The last 40 years has been
More insular, yeah.
in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going to be opened up to all sorts of temptations and evils
That's right.
we had before.
Well, and I think that part of this also is it's not just the people getting ready for the change. I think we could read this as God getting ready for the change. So this isn't just, I think there could be a test of temptation here, or kind of a training of how not to give into temptation of doing what the others are doing. But I think there's another piece, which is like, as this relationship continues to mature and change, God is slowly stepping back and saying, I got you to the promised land. I gave you the rules. Good luck. And so it's almost like a little bit of a pep talk where they're like about to go over the Jordan, and here are the rules. Don't forget the rules. The rules are really important. You are a distinct nation, even though there's other human beings around you, and you still have to follow the rules. Vivian. Exactly. I did my best. Good luck. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, come your way.
I like Hillel's resolution. He says, very simply, what is hateful to you do not do unto another. And if you take that as a grounding line, I think we're pretty safe.
Yeah, that's the whole Torah on 1 foot story. Right, it's the golden rule. Many peoples around the world came up with the same, almost like there's some universal wisdom in that. We all came up with the same idea to treat other people the way we want to be treated. I think here, as we get into some of these laws, we'll see it doesn't always make sense that these are the laws in that teaching. I'm coming your way, Carol, one more before you.
What is the role of justification to go into that evil thing? Like, for instance, you're in war, so you're okay to kill the enemy, things like that. And how does Torah tell us to navigate?
Torah doesn't see that as evil, right? So I think, if I could be so bold as to speak for Torah, I think that my understanding of Torah is that in cases like that, so in case you didn't hear, the example was, how does Torah justify having to do something that's terrible, like going into war and killing the enemy? So, when we have war scenes in the Torah, that's not seen as evil. It's seen as the thing that God is in their company helping them to do. God is Lord of hosts, not just the heavenly hosts, but also of the armies. And so God is supposed to go in the tabernacle into battle, or else they don't win. So in that case, that's a religious prescription. That's not an evil act. I think that is an interesting tension for us to hold in the modern world, because we might see certain things differently than Torah saw them. But in theory, the values that we're living by are the values that are espoused here and in our sacred tradition. And so one of the compelling pieces of the Reform movement is the kind of mandate to update our understanding over time and to remain rooted in text and to continue grappling with the tradition and to kind of sharpen the lens. Like when you go to the eye doctor and they say better 1 or 2, you're supposed to know, okay, 1 was okay for a while, now I understand things differently. 2 is sharper, or 2 is the way that I want to, guide my life. So I think we can't really retroject our own kind of judgment on what would need to even be justified. Because in this case, if God's saying go into battle against the Moabites, you pack up your camp and you go into battle. Yeah. Carol.
Yeah, I was thinking, Moses isn't going with them.
Right.
So God talks to Moses.
Yep.
Moses ain't there. He's not gonna solve your problems now.
That's
He's
right.
not gonna tell you what's right and wrong. I'm putting this on you, each one of you. I'm not gonna talk to each one of you individually.
Right. Right.
This is what I've explained to Moses. This is what he shared with you. Do it.
So it's not just a change in collective punishment, it's a change in an individual obligation also. Like your prophet's not going. Now, we'll have a succession plan with Joshua. We've got different traditions around that, but Moses is not going. And so I like this idea that it's actually related to having to plan differently. Things are changing. Transition is afoot. Here's what you have to do. Yeah, welcome. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Do you feel like this is the first kind of section of Torah that's really pointing to us having free will? It feels like it's a strong case here for free will. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that just to build on this, this starts with the first story of Adam and Eve and making choices and the spiritual concept of Tzimtzum, where God continually is removing himself and withdrawing himself from man to allow man to make decisions. And perhaps in this evolution of the storyline, this is a major transformation.
Right. Agreed. It's funny you bring up Tzimtzum. I'm doing some reading for High Holidays, and I'm reading Shai Held's new book, Judaism is About Love. Has anyone read this? Hopefully some of you will read this with me soon. And in it, he has a section on the love of parents and children and the relationship, like how we might draw lines between God's relationship with the Israelites and, learn from that. And he talks about Tzimtzum, and what's interesting is Tzimtzum is kind of this mystical idea of God's contraction, that in order to create the universe, God had to make space for the universe. And so God pulls back into a smaller vessel. And our sages don't agree on what that means because they don't agree. Our sages don't have the same theology. There's no monolithic theology of the Jewish people, which is fun and confusing. And so we have some who think that if God is omnipresent, if God is everywhere, which, we're about to shake lulavs to this effect in a couple of months. If God is everywhere, then how can there be room for anything but God? So maybe Tzimtzum. But then there's another idea. How does God fit in the tabernacle? Right? If we're supposed to have God's presence with us, how does God make God's self so tiny as to fit in this little closet that they're going to carry around? And the idea is that God can actually kind of like portion God's self. And that's why God says, Shachanti b'tocham, my Shekhinah is going to come and be present. This is all mystical. This isn't the plain reading of the text, obviously. But that God is going to be able to portion God's self, and a piece of God's presence will get to dwell among the Israelites. But then the question is, where's the rest of God? What does it do to God to split into different pieces? And so this is all just a tangent to say I was just reading about Tzimtzum yesterday, and I think the idea is, it's a very interesting idea theologically. It's a very rabbinic solution to how can God be two things at once? Like, how can God be within and beside and also enormous? And the idea of making space is very compelling. God has to make space for us to, not just to exist in the creation story, but also eventually to have the agency to choose between blessing and curse, to have some kind of agency in the world, some free will. And that's different than what other religions believe, by the way. So it's an interesting choice. Okay, should we read some of these laws? Actually, since we're on this topic, look at the piece by Nomi Kaltman. It says The Choice to Choose Wisely, the middle of page 2. Let's do some of this, and then I'll move us forward. Okay, this is what Nomi writes. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Re'eh, God has given us a unique option, the power to choose our own agency. With this choice comes the responsibility, which may result in our choices being mistaken or reflect a missed opportunity to elevate the mundane tasks in our lives and elevate them to acts of pure holiness. Mitzvot apply to normal, everyday things like eating, getting dressed, and sleeping. However, while they may seem mundane, each of these acts reflects a sacred choice, one in which we commit ourselves to working towards options that will improve ourself and our beings. The Malbim notes that blessings and curses are not floating ideas that are a concept in some far-off time. Rather, the blessings that are bestowed upon those who immerse themselves in Torah and Judaism convey a sense of achievement, satisfaction, and sacred growth that is evident to everyone around them. The blessings they receive, the Malbim says, are so obvious that all can see them. This encourages other people to strive for a commitment to Torah and mitzvot and to actively choose a life that will endow them with blessings. The blessings or curses that people may experience are not subject to randomness. Judaism believes in hashgacha pratit, divine providence, a world in which everything that happens is intended and occurs due to divine will. The fact that something may seem to have occurred randomly does not detract from this principle. In fact, the reverse is true. Everything that we choose to do in our lives reflects a reality in which we have the power to choose our fate. Taking an attitude that everything is deliberate and reflects the will of God determines whether we are blessed or cursed. The choice is ours through our actions and decisions. There's also a deeper message of this week's parsha. Because God has given the Jewish people a choice, we are able to affirm ourselves to a commitment to a world of goodness, one in which we reflect the will of God through our actions. This results in people treating each other with respect and fairness. These actions reverberate so that the world we live in then echoes this kindness, and the society we live in is filled with fairness. In contrast, if we forsake the divine word of God, we then curse our future by choosing to reject a life of blessing. Instead, a world is created in which people suffer needlessly and do not have revealed blessings in their life. As we read the parashah this week, we recall that the choice is ours. We have free will. We have the option to choose. God has given us this opportunity, and now it is our decision to make the right choice to ensure that our lives reflect our sacred calling and mission. The choice is simply ours. This is so interesting because the choice is ours, and also we believe in divine providence. And so how have we been able to hold those two things at the same time for all of our existence? This is a great example of how we hold so many seemingly competing truths at once. If God has the ultimate providence over all, and also we have free will, one might think that those are incompatible. But somehow in Judaism, they're not. What do you think, Steve?
I take the re'eh. You have to see the blessing. You have to understand that certain actions are the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
If we blind ourselves to people struggling in the world,
Yeah.
The orphan and the widow and the stranger, if we turn away and we don't look at them and see them as people,
Right.
then we're going to be going down the path of evil.
That's right.
But if we truly see them, then we can see what blessing might be there.
I love that this is your example because this is the Torah portion with there shall be no needy. That rule is in this Torah portion. So the Deuteronomist agrees with you. We have to humanize the humans around us. We cannot dehumanize them.
You also deify them.
What do you mean?
Well, if you give money to a beggar, for instance, instead of thinking of the person as a beggar or a poor person, you can think of giving something to God instead. And that in itself is a blessing. You don't care what the person does with the money. You just give because that person at that moment embodies spiritual principle.
I wouldn't go so far as to call that deification, though. I think I might say that we are honoring the Tselem Elohim in that person. We're seeing the image of God in that person, but we wouldn't. I don't know that we would say we're giving it to God, but I like your nuance here that when we see a person in need and we help them, that is our religious obligation. We are seeing them as the kind of divine spark within. And I love that. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful worldview. I think if we saw all the people around us that way, we'd live in a much more peaceful society. Yeah. Please.
In the sentence that says taking an attitude that everything is deliberate and reflects the will of God, well, the prime example is Joseph and his brothers.
Okay.
So the point is, if you can align yourself with that, you might eliminate a lot of suffering. Like, God forbid somebody dies, instead of thinking, what did we do wrong? Well, there's a reason for this. Now that's extreme, and it's pretty hard to swallow, but I think
Yeah.
that's what that line says. You have to accept what's going on. You might not like it, but that's the way it is.
Yeah. This is really tough. The idea that I think this is also tough because the idea that God would be so acutely involved in the life or death of a person is really, we're about to get to Unatana Tokef in the high holidays. Who shall live and who shall die, who by fire. This is an incredibly difficult piece of liturgy, especially for folks who are either in hospice or remembering a loved one who's died. Like that's a very difficult thing to grapple with. And it seems informed by this.
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult, but I'm saying
Yeah.
if you could do it,
Yeah.
if you could align yourself with this, it might save you a lot of grief.
Maybe.
I'm not sure you can do it.
Yeah. Maybe.
That's what the sentence says.
Yeah, Kelly, what do you think?
Could the deliberateness be interpreted as the deliberate choice to give humans free will? It doesn't necessarily imply that God is involved in every singular moment in our lives, but the deliberateness is the choice to give humans free will, and therefore this
Whatever unfolds is part of the plan. Uh-huh. That's an interesting way around it. Yeah. I like that. Malcolm.
I want to distinguish our obligation is to pursue or to follow these laws to the best that we can understand.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we can't understand everything that happens in the world or happens to us doesn't necessarily mean that it evades or it is against God's laws or God's will. It reflects the fact that we don't have a perfect understanding.
Right.
We're human.
Right. Well, and that's, there are things that are beyond our understanding, like perhaps by God's design. Interestingly, I do think that the Jews are a people who seek understanding. We're all here studying Torah together. Like, we are people who, over our generations, have sought understanding of what is holy, understanding of text, understanding of the why behind things. We are a people who ask questions. 9 times out of 10, when I sit with a new conversion candidate, one of the first things they say to me is, as a kid, I was raised in X, Y, or Z religion. I was never allowed to ask questions. I met one Jewish person. I realized that there was a different way, and now I see I can ask as many questions as I want. This happens all the time because we are, if anything, we are overly abundant with questions. We may not have answers, but we may not have one answer. We have lots and lots of questions. We are seekers of understanding. And I think that at least matches what I need in the world. Some of us are seekers of God in different ways, but many of us are seekers of understanding. What's difficult is when we cannot find understanding. That's very frustrating. But, there are things that are meant to be perhaps unknowable to us. Yeah, Viv.
Oh, well, I don't know that I have a thought here. But what keeps bubbling up to me is this overarching definition of choice.
Mm.
Choose life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not life versus death. It's life on earth, perhaps.
Mm.
It's life with one another. It's life in relationships. It's not the choice of evil and good.
Mm.
It's choice to, and that's what I'm trying to define for myself. What does that mean? Choose life. Choose life. It sounds like, it just sounds like the banner
Yeah, this is also like how much agency. Surely there are boundaries around the agency that God's giving us. Although we use the phrase free will in English, which sounds like it would be fully free. But I think one of the pieces about choosing life is choosing God's path and not falling off that path. And back to halakha, the word halakha is related to holech, which is to walk. A halakha is the path. It's not actually law the same way we think about like a legal code. It's the path we're supposed to be on, the path we walk with God. And so the idea that we would be pulled into these pseudo gods that our neighbors are worshiping or whatever, like a life affirming choice, according to this, is to choose what is becoming the Jewish path, the religion of Adonai Elohim. And actually, that's going to be a good transition to our next set of verses. So take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 12. We're going to start with verse 2. Okay. You must destroy all the sites at which the nations you are to dispossess worshipped their gods, whether on lofty mountains and on hills or under any luxuriant tree. Tear down their altars, smash their pillars, put their sacred posts to the fire, and cut down the images of their gods, obliterating their name from that site. Do not worship your God Elohim in like manner, but look only to the site that your God Adonai will choose amidst all your tribes as God's habitation to establish the divine name there. There you are to go, and there you are to bring your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions, your votive and free will offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and flocks. Together with your households, you shall feast there before your God Adonai, happy in all the undertakings which your God Adonai has blessed you. I have a page turn, sorry. You shall not act at all as we now act here, each of us as we please, because you have not yet come to the allotted haven that your God Adonai is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and settle in the land that your God Adonai is allotting to you, and God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, and you live in security, then you must bring everything that I command you to the site where your God Adonai will choose to establish the divine name. Your burnt offerings and other sacrifices, your tithes and contributions shall rejoice before your God Adonai with your sons and daughters, with your male and female slaves, along with the family of the Levite in your settlements, for he has no territorial allotment among you. Take care not to sacrifice your burnt offerings in any place you like, but only in the place that Adonai will choose in one of your tribal territories. There you shall sacrifice your burnt offerings, and there you shall observe all that I enjoin upon you. So we've talked a lot about the choose life verse, Uvacharta v'chayim, but here we have Hamakom asher yivchar Adonai, the place that God will choose. So interestingly, another set of verses about choice. We are supposed to understand this to mean Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not named here, but we are supposed to know. We're supposed to understand that we're talking about Jerusalem. So there's lots of different theories around this and why it's Jerusalem, but think first about what it does to the economy of ancient Israel to centralize worship in one place. What does that do? Because remember, this is all an economy. So what does it do what does it do? It pulls people together. There's going to be times where we're going to all be in the same place. What does it do to the other priests who are not in Jerusalem?
It cuts them off, it separates them.
They're unemployed. They get laid off. You know, if you say that all of the people are going to have to bring their sacrifices, think about what it costs to sacrifice an animal. They have to come to Jerusalem. The other priests who have been set up in the high places, they've made their altars, they're following Levitical law, all of a sudden they don't get to eat, they don't have their own territory. You have a crisis then, right? All these priests are going to have no job, and everybody's going to have to come to one centralized place. So then you're thinking, you can't go to your local altar anymore. right? Like if I'm living in a different part of the land, I'm now going to have to, not that it's that big of a land, but I'm going to have to make a journey to another place with my livestock. It changes things. So who do we think wrote this? Well, I mean, we have a sense that this is one of the tensions of Deuteronomy. It was probably meant to stand alone, and there's a clear kind of political power to the Deuteronomist. And so if we consider that this was written by somebody who had a position of power in Jerusalem, we would understand this is advantageous to them, right? To have everybody coming to their altar, having everybody in their temple. So this is the groundwork for what will become the temple and then the second temple, this Makom Asher Yivchar Adonai, the place where God will choose to put God's name. This sets it up. We have to wonder, though, historically, when was this written? Before or after there's already a temple? Before or after there's already centralization? Because it does not say Jerusalem. Let's take a look on the handout. There's a piece here. We'll just look at a couple spots here. It's a much larger article by Dr. David Glatt-Gilad called How the Jerusalem Temple Was Chosen as the Only Place of Worship. So he writes, Deuteronomy commands centralizing worship of God at the temple once peace is obtained. When was this supposed to occur according to Deuteronomic history, and when did it happen historically? So he says Deuteronomy begins with many chapters in which Moses is portrayed as delivering a historical retrospective and extended exhortations to the people about to cross over the Jordan River into the land of Israel. Only afterward, in chapter 12, our chapter, does it turn to the specific laws, the Deuteronomic law collection, that the people were meant to observe in the land. This is the core of Deuteronomy, encompassing chapters 12 to 16. The collection begins with the demand that all cultic activity, whether sacrificial or votive, take place exclusively at God's one chosen site, a notion referred to in scholarship as cult centralization. The Israelites are commanded to worship God not in the way the Canaanites did in multiple places, which the Israelites are commanded to destroy, but only at God's one chosen place. So here's some theological rationale. Hezekiah was left with a country in ruins, but his capital city survived. Once Sennacherib's army withdrew and Jerusalem was spared from destruction, the notion of God's specifically choosing Jerusalem, an identifying feature of the Davidic monarchic ideology, became further entrenched and enhanced. Thus, the special status of the Jerusalem temple as the sole focal point for worship of God was confirmed by historical circumstances. After Hezekiah's death, Kings describes a period in which forbidden practices are again ascendant. This came to an end with the reign of his great-grandson, Josiah, in the second half of the 7th century BCE, who took similar centralizing steps after finding the law book in the temple in the 18th year of his reign, the law book meaning Devarim. This law book is, well, he's going to say the same thing, generally understood to be some form of Deuteronomy, and the description of it being found offers circumstantial evidence to it being relatively new during this period, meaning Josiah's reign. Thus, many scholars suggest that Deuteronomy, or at least the core of the Deuteronomic law collection with its requirement for centralized worship, was written during the period between Hezekiah's reform and that of Josiah. Do you buy it? Anybody have another theory? This is a great argument for the documentary hypothesis. I'm feeling a little lightheaded. We keep talking though. Got a little woozy. I know you won't be able to see me, sorry. This is one of the arguments for the documentary hypothesis because Deuteronomy seems so distinct. The documentary hypothesis is the JEPD, the different sources. So the Yahwist and the Elohim author and the judge. Anyway, so we have Deuteronomy, which feels very distinct, and we have an idea that it could have been written significantly later than other passages of Torah while this was already kind of underway. They want the centralization to happen because that's what they were experiencing. Do you buy it? I think so. It's pretty good. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah. So Are there any things like Torah scrolls that don't, like that wouldn't have Deuteronomy, for instance?
Maybe that's a extreme example, but yeah. I mean, you're phrasing the question when this was written and I'm just saying, are there archaeological evidence to suggest what we see as the five books were in some millennia, century past, not what we recognize as the five books today.
Well, this would be Rabbi Klein's favorite topic, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls. He hates the Dead Sea Scrolls. So Dead Sea Scrolls gives us different archaeological evidence of a particular community at a particular moment. But I couldn't speak thoughtfully about like if they have an example of what you're talking about in their collection, but Qumran would be the place to look first. Because really, if you think about how we write these Torah scrolls, they're not very durable through ancient times. I mean, now we keep them in these humidity-controlled arks in buildings that have air conditioning, and it's different. But that's why Qumran was so uniquely impactful, was because they were kept and safe and somehow survived so many years. So I would check there first. It's a good question. Okay, let's read a little bit more. I want to look at chapter 13. We're kind of skipping forward here to learn more about these kind of prophets or these magicians that may be afoot. So we'll start with verse 1. Be careful to observe only that which I enjoin upon you, neither add to it nor take away from it. If there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner who gives you a sign or a portent saying, let us follow and worship another God whom you have not experienced, even if the sign or portent named to you comes true, do not heed the words of that prophet or that dream diviner. For the eternal your God is testing you to see whether you really love Adonai your God with all your heart and soul. Adonai your God is the one whom you should follow, whom you should revere, whose commandments you should observe, whose orders you should heed, whom you should worship, and to whom you should hold fast. As for that prophet or dream diviner, they shall be put to death for having urged disloyalty to Adonai your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt and who redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the path that the eternal your God commanded you to follow. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. If your brother, page turn, your mother's son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your closest friend entices you in secret, saying, come, let us worship other gods, whom neither you nor your ancestors have experienced, from among the gods of the people around you, either near to you or distant, anywhere from one end of the earth to the other. Do not assent or give heed to any of them. Show no pity or compassion, and do not cover up the matter, but take that person's life. Let your hand be the first to put them to death, followed by the hand of all the rest of the people. Stone them to death for having sought to make you stray from Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Thus all Israel will hear and be afraid, and such evil things will not be done again in your midst. Yikes.
My interpretation, this opposes the idea of a Messiah.
Ooh, can you elaborate on that? That's really interesting. So Antichrist is funny. But we understand what you mean. But I think the idea that we couldn't, this is a great example of how what happens in one place in Tanakh may not be consistent with another place. And so, yeah, it's a good point. We may not be drawn to Mashiach with these verses, but later on, there will be arguments in favor of seeking Mashiach. Again, a piece that the Reform movement has basically moved away from as an ideology. Okay, I think that these verses are very interesting for several reasons. Number one, I think they're extreme and we should notice when Torah gets extreme about something. The fact that if you have your own son or daughter comes to you and goes, hey, let's go worship this other God, you are the first hand to put that person to death.
Seems kind of harsh.
I would agree. It does seem kind of harsh. It does. It is harsh. It's completely non-ambiguous. It is very clear what is supposed to happen. You cannot be drawn into these other practices. Now, we might wonder, why is God so insecure? Because God has just brought these people out of Egypt through the wilderness to the promised land, which God has promised to do. They have now basically got their toes in the sand, ready to cross the river. Why is God so worried that they're going to forget about God or be drawn into these other, idolatrous practices? We have to wonder, what's going on there? What do you think?
One speaker I heard talked about when the Torah is that harsh and says something like that, what it means is that practice was actually happening.
For sure.
And
For sure.
so you read a portion like that, and it makes you think that these things were really going on.
Oh, we loved an idol.
And then the leaders said, well, we really want to address this head on, and we're going to come up with harsh punishment.
Yeah. This is the whole case for speed limits. You wouldn't have speed limits if people weren't speeding, right? We have law. Clearly something was going on with idol worship. And archaeologists will love to tell us that there are many idols found all throughout the ancient land of Israel and its neighbors, because that's what people were doing. And by the way, we can show a little compassion for our ancestors. If you think about the story as we receive it in Torah, the idea that there is a God that speaks through Moses that they can't really see, that is sometimes a fire and sometimes a cloud and sometimes a big storm on Mount Sinai, who's just giving a ton of rules through this guy who is kind of Egyptian and kind of a Hebrew. The whole thing, it's a little confusing, and it's a little amorphous. It doesn't feel tactile. An idol, you can see it, you can hold it, you can offer things to it. It's a much more tangible relationship with God. And psychologically, that makes sense as to why it's compelling. It feels more stable. If you think about the chaos they're going through, having a tangible thing to hold on to makes sense. God disagrees, which is fine. We can respect that. But the whole process of why idol worship would have been attractive makes sense when you think about what they've been asked to just kind of accept as a relationship with a God they can't really see, who is very scary. Jimmy and then Kelly.
So what you just said is the reason Christianity is so popular and why it works.
That might be one reason why it's popular.
If you talk to any of the, say, professors
Mm-hmm.
of Christianity, they'll tell you what I just said. It's a big reason to promote a mortal figure.
I know, but they wouldn't call that idolatry.
I know they wouldn't call it idolatry.
But you're saying having the tangible, kind of a human form.
I'm not against it. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that's the reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It's a story you can see. It's different. Yeah, Kelly and then Jackie.
I was just thinking, what you were talking about is maybe the non-economic argument for why there needs to be a centralized temple.
Okay.
We don't want to play telephone, right? It's like, I'm thinking of Darwin's birds, right? It's like this bird is a little bit different than this bird because they were in slightly different areas. So then over time, they actually end up being completely different species. We don't want that to happen. So it's like everybody comes here for these things. So it's not telephone. It is just what it was intended to be.
We're centralizing our message to God. Yeah, that's a great argument. Yeah, Jackie.
I wonder how many people in this room would hold a rock, favorite rock that they have, because it means something to them, and talk to it, and pray to it, and say things to it, and to pick up a feather and take it in their home and hold a feather and feel that was a sign from something. So people do that.
We do. Well, and there's another piece, I think, with idolatry, which some of my bar mitzvah students have helped me to kind of understand, which is like if you ask a 12-year-old who's their idol, they have an idol. Like this is a word that we use. They have people that they look up to, that they admire, that they want to be like one day. It's a lot of the times it's LeBron James, just to be clear. Like a lot of the time. And but there is something about being able to look up to someone and try and embody who they are and to be inspired by them and to hopefully be called to your best self by who that person represents to you. And that does not always sound like a bad thing. We wouldn't call it idol worship necessarily, but they do have an idol. And so I think that's, there's the kind of natural pieces of the world that we might hold on to that feel tangible to us and represent something to us. We might ascribe meaning to those things. And then there's also the kind of cultural idols who, for better or for worse, are people that we observe.
Yeah, I think just to play on the Torah portion, right? Seeing is believing. And when the people were creating the golden calf, they were putting the best of their best. They were infusing not only themselves, but the material they had. And this concretizes and makes idol worship much more appealing than this God that I really can't see.
Definitely. It's Aviva Zornberg's whole thesis is that the book of Leviticus is the Teshuvah Torah for the golden calf. So it's a hyper correction. The way to show we're not idol worshipers with the golden calf is to have the strictest kind of priestly, I was going to say restrictions, but I already said strict, like regulations possible to make sure that the cult is sacred and boundaried.
But even the story going back to Abraham, which, isn't part of the storyline, is that the people around him, his father, were all building these idols.
Oh, yeah.
He pushed back on that.
Yeah. Yeah. There were lots of idols around. Yeah.
I feel like when you have a more centralized space as well, where everybody's meeting up to study and everything, it can make it really easy to take down a population of that kind. If you go idol worshipers in front and stuff like that, you don't have a bunch of people localized all across a big nation, and it can be really easy for ideas to get torn down.
So really it's like community organizing. We're stronger when we're together. Like this is a way of doing like more grassroots work. We're all going to be centralized. And that way we have more strength against the opposing forces around us. I like that take. That's good. Steve.
You asked why was God so insecure? I think sort of the seeds are, God has so many rules, and
Yeah.
these other religions don't have those kinds of, strictness of rules. So it's sort of like, to personify it, God created his own problem by having
It's almost too many rules, really.
so other religions feel a lot more attractive.
Interesting. So that would be the choice reason for folks that are like leaving observant Jewish life. It's just too many rules. There are a lot of rules. And we don't actually agree on how we say 613 commandments, but all these different rabbinic sages have a different list of 613. So it's hard to know. Lou?
This is after 40 years of probably indoctrination. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say we've rid our population of idol worship because we've been over them, 40 years saying, checking them out and saying, this is the way things go, and they're out in the middle of the desert, and that's their situation. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me to say, forget about these idols.
Well, and to your point, Lou, this is not the first time they've heard this commandment. I mean, how many times have I could do a search on my computer, how many times by this point in Torah have we been told not to worship idols? I mean, it's got to be an astounding number. Yeah.
I'd like to go back to Jerusalem. A Jerusalem
Right.
And, i.e. the northern king, shortly after they, Solomon builds his temple, the northern kingdom says, the heck with your temple. We're going to do our, because if you think about it, I mean, for, for the people to get to Jerusalem 4 or 5 times a year is like unreasonable because, I mean, we're agrarian. I mean, not everyone can afford to leave their homes. I mean, it's only recent, like, for example, for Muslims, it's only recent that, that people can think about getting to the Mecca, because
Right. The idea of pilgrimage in general is it's a stretch.
we have a transportation revolution.
Right. We can fly there. Yeah.
But in those days they had to go by foot.
Right.
So that it's, it's an undue burden for most people.
Well, and we have, yeah, there's so many factors if we think about like the ancient logistics of these pilgrimage holidays. I want to get back to these diviners, though. Look at page 4. We're going to look at a little Nachmanides, Ramban. He says on this verse, if there arise in the midst of thee a prophet or a dreamer of dreams. By the way, who do we have that's a dreamer of dreams? There we go. Scripture calls him a prophet on the basis of his own claim. For it is he who claims God spoke with me while I was awake, and I am his prophet, sent to you to command that you worship idols, as mentioned in verse 3. But it is possible that Scripture alludes to that which is true, that the person does indeed possess certain prophetic powers, for there is a prophetic potential in the souls of some people, by which they know of things to come, without the person knowing whence it comes to him. But he will isolate himself, and then a spirit will arrive within him, saying, thus will happen to that person in the future in a particular matter. The philosophers call that power of prophecy kahin. They do not know its cause, but the matter is substantiated in the sight of witnesses. Perhaps the soul, in its keenness, cleaves to the pure intellect and concentrates on it. Such a person is called prophet because he predicts events, and therefore the sign or wonder whereof he spoke comes to pass. Now, this is very interesting. So, in theory, what we're hearing in Torah is that you can't be listening to these prophets because only God would pick the prophet. The prophet can't just be like, well, I'm a prophet now. This is my new job. I'm here on my first day at the prophet factory to receive prophecy. Thank you so much. So instead, there's this kind of caveat that actually some people might truly have a prophetic capacity, but even that is not enough for you to listen to them because God has to give them prophecy. But this is like, we all may know someone who like seems to actually have like a dream that then comes to fruition. There's like a thing in my group of friends that one of us will have a dream when someone else is pregnant. And sometimes, actually, I did this once. I called my friend and I was like, I had a dream that you were pregnant. She was like, I'm not pregnant. She just didn't know it yet. And I was like, well, that's spooky. But I wouldn't say I'm a prophet. I would say that's a crazy coincidence, But there are these things, sometimes people can sense certain things. Nachmanides is like, don't buy it. Don't do it. It's got to come from God. So let's take a look at some other texts. Leviticus 19:26. You shall not eat anything with its blood. You shall not practice divination or soothsaying. Don't do it. Leviticus 19:31. Do not turn to ghosts and do not inquire of familiar spirits to be defiled by them. I, Adonai, am your God. Leviticus 20. Leviticus really hates all of this magic. A man or woman who has a ghost or familiar spirit shall be put to death. They shall be pelted with stones, and they shall retain the blood guilt. Okay. Deuteronomy 18. Let no one be found among you who consigns a son or daughter to the fire, or who is an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer, one who casts spells, or one who consults ghosts or familiar secrets, or one who inquires of the dead. Can I point out another stylistic of Deuteronomy, which is that Deuteronomy knows you're thinking of exceptions to the rules and will try and figure out a way to be as comprehensive as possible. The verses are very long. Like you may have noticed when we were talking about the gods of the people around you, near or distant from any end of the earth or the other. Like, lest you think there's a gap or a loophole, there's not, so don't try. All right, so I'm bringing to you from Jacob Milgram's commentary on the book of Numbers, part of an excursus that he writes on Parashat Balak, on our favorite soothsayer / prophet, Balaam, or Bilam in the Hebrew. So in this piece, here's what Jacob Milgram says. Magic comprises two categories, sorcery and divination, which differ in their objective. The former, sorcery, attempts to alter the future. Divination tries to predict it. The magician who claims to curse or bless is a sorcerer, whereas the one who foretells events but cannot affect them is a diviner. In Israel, sorcery, keshafim, is not only banned but punished with death. Mesopotamian laws also hold that sorcery, kishbu, is a capital crime, but they refer to black magic, for example, hexing an individual and other antisocial behavior. Sorcery also had a legitimate place in Mesopotamian society in exorcising demons and countering the effects of black magic. In biblical religion, sorcery in any form was by definition deemed ineffectual, since all events were under the control of the one God. It was also deemed heretical, since any attempt to alter the future purported to flout and overrule the will of God. Divination is the science of reading omens, predicted on the assumption that the course of events is predictable. Its advanced notices are imprinted in natural phenomena or discernible in man-made devices. Divination could be tolerated in Israel, since theoretically it was not compatible with monotheism. The diviner could always claim that he was only trying to disclose the immutable will of God. Indeed, according to one source, the prophet originally was called a diviner. Thus, the diviner, in contrast to the sorcerer, was never subject to judicial execution. The exception was the necromancer, but not those who consulted him, who laid claim to the sorcerer's power to raise up the dead even against their will. Yet certain religious circles condemned divination as an abominable heresy, not that they doubted its efficacy. Rather, God had granted Israel the special boon. He communicated with them directly, either through prophets or dreams. Nonetheless, the official cult did sanction one divinatory medium, the Urim and Tumim, carried on the high priest's ephod. Things that we cannot possibly understand or explain based on the Hebrew text. How nice. The Urim and Tumim. So I bring this because I think this is not the first time in Torah that we're wrestling with the idea that somebody might come to you and say, I understand something that you can't possibly understand. But the trick here is, it's not for you to understand unless God tells a prophet the message and delivers it directly to you. So don't go seeking from these other magicians or dream diviners or people who might tell you they understand better.
I've never understood why people are interested in divination in and of itself. I mean, I like my life to be interesting and not...
No spoilers. You don't want the spoilers. You want to have things unfold in real time. Yeah, I think, different people are drawn to different things, and some people want to have a sense of control over the world or whatever. Yeah, this is, my kids are small. We watch movies like Hercules. Hercules is a great Disney movie, amazing soundtrack. But in it, because it's Greek mythology, there are the fates. And my kids are watching, and they're like, who are these witches? What are they up to? Why do they have the string? What's the string? And the string is the lifeline. If they cut the string, you die. And so part of Hercules, as told by Disney, is that Hades is trying to basically outsmart the fates. But the fates control everything because they're the fates. It's a totally different conception of how the world is organized than Judaism. I mean, it's completely foreign to what we're talking about right here. That would not fly under the Deuteronomic law. There should be no fates cutting strings anywhere. Sharing one eye, that's kind of a spooky part. Okay, we have 15 minutes. Let's skip to, no, let's do this. Okay, let's look at Deuteronomy 15. We'll start at verse 1. Every 7th year, you shall practice remission of debts. This shall be the nature of the remission. All creditors should remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites. They shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin, for the remission proclaimed is of Adonai. You may dun the foreigner, but you must remit whatever is due from you from your kin. There shall be no needy among you, since your God, Adonai, will bless you in the land that your God, Adonai, is giving you as a hereditary portion. If only you heed your God, Adonai, and take care to keep all this instruction that I enjoin upon you this day. For your God, Adonai, will bless you as promised. You will extend loans to many nations, but require none yourself. You will dominate many nations, but they will not dominate you. If, however, there is a needy person among you, one of your kin in any of your settlements in the land that your God, Adonai, is giving you, do not harden your heart and shut your hand against your needy kin. Rather, you must open your hand and lend whatever is sufficient to meet the need. Beware lest you harbor the base thought, the 7th year, the year of remission, is approaching, so that you are mean and give nothing to your needy kin, who will cry out to Adonai against you, and you will incur guilt. Give readily and have no regrets when you do so, for in return your God, Adonai, will bless you in all your efforts and in all your undertakings. For there will never cease to be needy ones in your land, which is why I command you, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land. If a fellow Hebrew man or woman is sold to you, he shall serve you 6 years, and in the 7th year you shall set him free. When you set him free, do not let him go empty-handed. Furnish him out of the flock, threshing floor, and vat with which your God Adonai has blessed you. Bear in mind that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and your God Adonai redeemed you. Therefore I enjoin this commandment upon you today. But should he say to you, I do not want to leave you, for he loves you and your household and is happy with you, you shall take an awl and put it through his ear into the door, and he shall become your slave in perpetuity. Do the same with your female slave. When you do set either one free, do not feel aggrieved, for in the 6 years you have been given double the service of a hired worker. Moreover, your God Adonai will bless you in all you do. So there will be no needy because you're going to share. It's not that there's just an abundance, it's that you have to open your hand to make sure that there are no needy. It's not just that God's going to equally distribute all of the wealth. It's that, back to that idea of free will, when you are blessed, you will share it. You will not hoard your wares. You will not withhold the grain that you have to feed the hungry. The way that the miracle of abundance works is that you share it with other people, because there is enough for everyone if everyone shares. If only this were the guiding principle of the societies that we created in the modern era. The idea that there should be no needy is just such an amazing, compelling, almost far-fetched utopian idea, but it's meant to be exactly what happens when they get to the promised land. And so the idea that we would have enough if only we shared it, that's a very compelling idea. That's the blessing from God. If you do well, you get blessed, you have enough to share, so you have to share it.
But I don't understand how you teach that, especially to children, because when they have something, they want to keep it. If another kid comes over to play with it, or want to take it,
Yeah.
they don't want to give it. So my question is, if you lack that awareness, how do you get to the understanding that you just mentioned?
I'm not sure that most adults have that understanding. And I don't mean no offense to anyone in the room. I'm sure many of you have this understanding, but I'm not sure that as a society we're not our focal point is not how well do we share. Now there are certain like communes and there are certain kind of different ways of living where sharing is exactly what happens. It's a communal whatever. I think that's not really how most of us in modern America are living. And so, one way that we teach our kids is by example. And, if the example that kids are seeing is the hoarding of wealth and the like a complete lack of generosity, then that's what they see. So that gets us to tzedakah, which is what I'm going to talk about in just a second.
Well, how do you change that? Or how do you change society so that people...
How do you change society, Candy? You're asking the right question. No, you're right. How do we show sharing?
How I can increase my awareness to things like this.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it until you're aware of it.
Right. So I think so Jill Jacobs writes a book called There Shall Be No Needy on this verse. She has a whole book about it. There's a citation from it here. There shall be no needy. She's in here. She's got I brought part of an article from her here, but the book is very interesting. It's an older book. But she talks about basically that if we use there shall be no needy as a mission statement, and you give accordingly, or you serve accordingly, because you don't just give of money, you also give of time, or you open your home, or whatever feels safe and appropriate, that then you are decreasing neediness. So we know we're sitting in Beechwood, Ohio. There are people who are needy in Beechwood, Ohio, right where we are right now. There are people in this room who are needy in different ways. And so in theory, one way that we do this is by supporting organizations that work to, in one case, feed the hungry, but in other cases, just support those who are in need of the various things they're in need of. This institution is one of those. We have a fund called the Maimonides Fund, which is specifically to help people who are in need, who can't afford the things that they need to afford to survive. And we have ways that we try to help people with dignity and with great generosity, because we know that there are people who are needy. So we share the abundance. Yeah.
One possible way to try and understand this a little bit better is to look at it in terms of zero-sum game or not. Like if it's not zero-sum, there's infinite abundance. But if it's a zero-sum game, there is a finite number of resources which are available to people who then bicker and fight over what's there.
Our society does not focus on this or consider this a positive thing.
So
There shall be no need.
when we look at society writ large, that might be true, but then you think about the efforts of even just the people in this room to make the world a better place. Like it's not that we don't have to have 100% of people working on one mission to affect positive change, right? Like your individual actions as a Jew in the world can actually help in whatever the thing is where you're extending your effort, right?
I would just like it to affect me. I would like to be able to change the way my head works
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah,
And
no, I get that.
it's difficult to arrive at that and still participate in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a look at Jill Jacobs. Let's go to hers since we've named her. Hers starts with a vision of economic justice. I brought you the Ramban that she cites, but we're going to skip it for time. She says, Ramban, do you see where I am? We're on page, hang on, I have a different copy than you, 7. Ramban portrays the biblical text as optimistic but realistic. According to his reading of this passage, the Jewish people will generally observe the commandments, but will not always do so perfectly. Even if one generation succeeds in temporarily eradicating poverty, the possibility remains that poverty will resurface in another generation. Thus, the Torah anticipates a perfected world, but it plans for an imperfect one. A common debate among those involved in anti-poverty work concerns the relative value of direct service, addressing immediate needs, and of advocacy or organizing, addressing the need for systemic change. Advocates for direct service argue that the hungry need to be fed today, and that the homeless need somewhere to sleep tonight. Those who prefer organizing or advocacy point out that the soup kitchens and shelters will never make hunger and homelessness disappear, whereas structural change might wipe out these problems. The Deuteronomic response to this debate is a refusal to take sides, or better, an insistence on both. Rather than advocate exclusively either for long-term systemic change or for short-term response to need, this passage articulates a vision that balances the pursuit of full economic justice with attention to immediate concerns. In this reading, the text in question becomes a charge to work for the structural changes that will eventually bring about the end of poverty, while also meeting the pressing needs of those around us. So Candy, I think to your point, this doesn't mean that you individually are going to go out and feed the hungry and work with legislators to make sure people get fed and make sure that the SNAP benefits office is open. Like, you're not going to be able to do all of that. But you might have, as an individual, energy to lend to one of those efforts if that's the thing that calls you into a service, and that's where you focus your attention. And the idea is that that small incremental change that one person can do, you're never actually alone doing it. And so actually that does affect change. This idea, though, is so powerful that even if a generation could temporarily eradicate poverty or insert some other malady here, that it doesn't mean it won't ever arise again. And that's where the systemic changes come into play. That's why, in theory, with every generation, we can improve, generation over generation so that it's fewer people are suffering, basically. That's the work of the Jew. Mm-hmm. Right. And look, we know as people in the world, there are millions of challenges that people are facing. And so we won't all be able to fix all of those things. But in theory, if all of us tries to help contribute to fixing one of those things, we're doing some good work. I brought you Maimonides' ladder of tzedakah because I think it's very interesting, and we don't actually always study it. So this is from Mishnah Torah. These are his 8 levels of tzedakah, each greater than the next. Okay. He starts at the top. The greatest level, above which there is no greater, is to support a fellow Jew by endowing him with a gift or loan, or entering into a partnership with him, or finding employment for him, in order to strengthen his hand until he need no longer be dependent upon others. So independence is the very, very top thing. Level 2. A lesser level of charity than this is to give to the poor without knowing to whom one gives, and without the recipient knowing from whom he received. For this is performing a mitzvah solely for the sake of heaven. This is like the anonymous fund that was in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. There the righteous gave in secret, and the good poor profited in secret. Giving to a charity fund is similar to this mode of charity, though one should not contribute to a charity fund unless one knows that the person appointed over the fund is a trustworthy and wise and a proper administrator, like Rabbi Hanania ben Teradion. I like that he gets a shout out. Number 3, a lesser level of charity than this is when one knows to whom one gives, but the recipient does not know his benefactor. The greatest sages used to walk about in secret and put coins in the doors of the poor. It is worthy and truly good to do this if those who are responsible for distributing charity are not trustworthy. See, he knows money causes trouble. Number 4, a lesser level of charity than this is when one does not know to whom one gives, but the poor person does know his benefactor. The greatest sages used to tie coins into their robes and throw them behind their backs, and the poor would come up and pick the coins out of their robes so that they would not be ashamed. A lesser level than this is when one gives to the poor person directly into his hand, but gives before being asked. A lesser level than this is when one gives to the poor person after being asked. A lesser level than this is when one gives inadequately, but gives gladly and with a smile. And a lesser level than this is when one gives unwillingly. But by the way, that's still on the ladder. That's still tzedakah, giving unwillingly. It's still a mitzvah to do, even if you don't want to do it. You still do it, and that's still tzedakah. So, if we were coming up with our own ladder of tzedakah today, it may not match Maimonides, and I think that's fine, but it is interesting to think about, are there types of giving that are, that protect the dignity and enhance the humanity of the person to whom we're helping, or the person whom we're helping. So I think, those are considerations when you think about your own charitable giving or your own efforts to repair the world, to just have that in your mind. Where would Maimonides put this giving? And also, is everyone trustworthy? Do I know that actually the donation I'm making gets into the hands of somebody who needs it somehow? To really do your due diligence when you're supporting different organizations and make sure that you're kind of as impactful as you hope to be. Maida.
I'm a little concerned about there's no
Well, I would tell you it could be a human being, but this is what Maimonides writes. But you know, there's the whole rabbinic conception of how we have these like concentric circles of concern. This is like a common tool that our sages use, where like you have to fill your own cup first, and then you take care of your family, and then you take care of your neighborhood, and then your broader community. And in theory, like the Jewish people come before everybody else, because when you're looking at those concentric circles, that's who's close to you. So my guess is that he would say, once all the Jews have what they need, then you go out to the next level. But for our purposes today, Maida, I think any human being that's in need, if you're able to help them, that's what you do. Yeah. Okay, friends, we are out of time for today. Please enjoy the rest of your source sheet, perhaps over a Shabbat lunch. And I will look forward to the next chance we get to study together. I'm going to say this in every room I'm in from now until the deadline, but make sure you check your voter registration status. Midterm season is upon us. There are lots of websites, including the Ohio Board of Elections, where you can check your status. You have to click on your name. Just because your name appears does not mean you're registered. So please check, double check, triple check, make your voting plan. Thank you all very much. Shabbat Shalom. Doris and Jackie brought them.